The night lay over the town like a silken shroud, the sky painted in the pale shimmer of moonlight. Stone rooftops, dark with age, caught the silver glow in faint glimmers, while deep shadows pooled between the houses. From far beyond the winding lanes, the church bells tolled slow, solemn notes that rolled through the air as though reluctant to leave the steeple. Each chime drifted over the settlement, lingering for a breath before melting into the stillness. The scent of wood clung to the night, curling in soft ribbons from unseen chimneys. It was a warm smell, touched with pine resin and faint traces of burning oak, a reminder of fires banked for the long hours until dawn. Somewhere, a shutter creaked gently in the breeze, then settled again into silence. You pause at the mouth of a narrow lane, your breath misting faintly in the cool air. The cobblestones at your feet glisten where shallow puddles have caught the moonlight, each one rippling gently in the whisper of the wind. Your footsteps fall in a measured rhythm, each one finding the rise and dip of the uneven stones. They are cool beneath your soles, the chill seeping faintly upward, carrying with it the memory of the day's rain. Some stones tilt ever so slightly under your weight, worn loose by countless seasons, yet holding their place as they have for generations. In the dips between them, puddles linger, shallow pools that catch the moonlight and scatter it in trembling fragments. A breeze brushes over their surfaces, sending silver ripples across each reflection. You catch glimpses of the night sky within them, pieces of moon, fragments of stars, the ghostly outline of a passing cloud. Somewhere nearby, the quiet drip of water falls from a rooftop into one of these small mirrors, the sound crisp and deliberate in the hush of the street. The lane narrows as you walk, the walls on either side drawing closer with each step. Tall, timber-framed houses loom above, their upper floors jutting forward as if straining to overhear your passing. The beams are dark and weathered, their angles slightly bowed with age, the plaster between them cracked in hairline patterns like a map of forgotten roads. Overhead, the rooftops almost touch, leaving only a slender ribbon of night sky visible. The moonlight filters through in pale slashes, casting long, spindly shadows that stretch across the cobblestones like grasping fingers. They sway gently when the wind stirs, reaching for you and then pulling back into the darkness of doorways and alcoves. Somewhere far above, a shutter shifts, and for a moment you think you see the glint of an eye watching, but then it's gone, and the lane is still again. You round a gentle bend in the lane, and there it is, a single window, its frame heavy with age, spilling warm amber light across the cobblestones. The glow trembles faintly, shaped by the flicker of a flame within, and for a moment it looks almost alive, breathing against the cool blue of the night. The rest of the street lies in shadow, silent and unmoving, yet this one patch of gold seems to hum with quiet purpose. It pools at your feet, washing away the silver cast of moonlight, and carries with it the faint suggestion of movement beyond the glass. You feel it then, a pull, gentle but insistent, like the tug of a dream you don't wish to wake from. Something in that light promises secrets, knowledge, perhaps even a touch of magic. Your curiosity stirs, and without thinking, you take a step closer. You stop before the door, a slab of heavy oak, its grain deep and dark, the surface worn smooth where countless hands have pushed it open across the years. The edges are rounded, softened not by design but by time itself, as though the wood remembers every visitor who has stood where you now stand. Your gaze drifts to the ironwork thick, hand-forged hinges curling into decorative shapes, blackened with age, yet still strong. The latch is cool beneath your fingers, its chill cutting through the warmth lingering in your skin from the walk. It is the kind of cold that seems to seep inward, grounding you in the moment, making you aware of every heartbeat, every breath. Somewhere beyond the door, faint and muffled, you hear the quiet clink of glass and the whisper of paper sliding over wood. The study is awake. Before you lift the latch, the scent reaches you, faint at first, then fuller as you lean closer to the seam where the wood meets the frame. It seeps out in slow, invisible curls, like a secret unwilling to rush. There is rosemary in it, sharp yet soothing, its green fragrance carrying the memory of sun-warmed gardens. Beneath that, the richer, resinous thread of frankincense, warm, golden, and almost sweet, the kind of scent that lingers in old chapels and sacred places. And then, tucked quietly at the edges, something metallic. A scent that calls to mind cold coins, worked steel, or the faint temps left on fingertips after touching bronze. It is the smell of work and ritual, of elements drawn together in patient hands. You breathe it in again, slower this time, letting it fill your senses. It feels like standing on the threshold of a world apart from the one you know. You press the latch, and the door yields with a slow, deliberate creak. A wave of warm, close air greets you, wrapping around your shoulders like a heavy cloak. It carries with it the scents you noticed before, now richer, fuller, as though they have been waiting for you inside. The light is soft and unhurried. Candles stand in brass holders along the workbench and shelves, their flames swaying in the slightest movement of air. Each flicker sends shadows drifting across the walls, not the sharp kind, but the slow swaying shapes that seem almost alive, bending and stretching, as if in some ancient silent dance. Glass vessels catch the candlelight and scatter it into faint wavering reflections. Papers rustle faintly somewhere in the room, though you see no one. It feels less like you have entered a room, and more like you have stepped quietly into the heart of a dream. At the far side of the room, a small hearth glows with a quiet, steady life. The flames lick lazily at a short stack of wood, their tips curling into orange and gold before fading into threads of blue. Each log shifts now and then with a muted pop, sending a brief cascade of sparks tumbling upward before they vanish into the chimney's dark mouth. The heat drifts outward in gentle waves, softening the cool air you carried in from the street. It spills into the dim study, settling into the corners, mingling with the scents of herbs and smoke, until the room feels as though it has always been this warm dot. The flicker of the hearth joins the candlelight, the two sources of flame breathing together, weaving light and shadow into a tapestry across the stone floor. It is not just warmth you feel here, it is a welcome. Along the nearest wall, shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, their wooden boards bowed ever so slightly under the weight of years. Glass and ceramic containers crowd together in uneven rows, some tall and narrow, others squat and wide, their shapes as varied as their contents. The candlelight glances off rounded surfaces, slipping over the soft glaze of clay and catching in the faint imperfections of hand-blown glass. Faded labels cling to many of them, the ink browned and smudged, the lettering in a careful looping. Script, some are written in Latin, others in symbols you do not recognize. Signs meant, perhaps, to keep knowledge secret from casual eyes. Inside, powders lie in fine drifts, ochre reds, chalky whites, deep greens. Crystals cluster like frozen stars at the bottom of certain jars, their facets dim in the low light. Bundles of dried roots twist together in muted shades of brown and gold, their surfaces rough and fibrous, carrying the faint scent of earth, even from where you stand. The shelves feel less like storage and more like a library of elements, a place where every jar, every scrap of matter holds its own quiet story. You turn toward a long, sturdy work table set beneath the warm spill of candlelight. The surface is crowded but not cluttered. Each object seems to have been placed with deliberate care. Several quills rest in dark glass inkwells, their tips stained deep black, the feathers fanned slightly as though they had just been set down moments ago. One quill lies across an open sheet of parchment, the ink at its tip still glistening faintly, catching the light. The pages before you are covered in diagrams, circles within circles, intersected by lines that seem more deliberate than decorative. Tiny notations in a precise, slanted hand wrap around the shapes like vines around a trellis. Some symbols you almost recognize, astrological signs, perhaps, while others feel older, more secretive, their meaning just beyond reach. At the edge of the table, a compass and straightedge rest beside a thin ruler, their brass fittings warm in the firelight. You imagine the alchemist leaning here, eyes intent, tracing these lines as if mapping not the heavens, but the hidden patterns that shape the world itself. Set neatly along one side of the table are tools of gleaming brass, their surfaces catching the soft flicker of the hearth and candlelight. A pair of calipers rests open, their curved arms poised as if mid-measure, ready to gauge the precise diameter of a coin or the width of a gem. Beside them, a compass with fine needle-sharp points waits to inscribe perfect circles on parchment or delicate etchings into soft metal. But it is the astrolabe that draws your eye, a disc of intricate craftsmanship, its plates engraved with constellations and scales. When tilted, it glitters faintly, the engraved lines and markings holding shadows in their depths. In skilled hands, it can chart the positions of the stars, track the passing of time, and guide the alchemist's work in harmony with the heavens. These are not simply tools for measuring the physical world. They are instruments for translating the silent language of nature into shapes and numbers, bridging the gap between earth and sky. Here, precision is not just practical, it is a kind of devotion. On a side table near the hearth, a small congregation of glass vessels stands in quiet assembly. Their shapes are strange and graceful, tall necks curving like swans' throats, wide-bellied flasks tapering to narrow mouths, each one poised on a brass or iron stand. The firelight dances over them, slipping through the curves and hollows, breaking into warm golds and cool silvers as it bends in the glass. The necks arc and twist in deliberate patterns, designed to guide vapor from one chamber to another, coaxing hidden essences from their raw forms. Here, an alembic, its two bulbs connected by a slender bridge. There, a retort, its long bent spout, reaching down toward a waiting vessel. Each bears the subtle marks of its making, the tiny ripples where molten glass cooled, the faint whirl at the base where it was severed from the blower's rod. They are as much works of art as they are tools of transformation. Vessels where science and beauty meet in the quiet glow of the alchemist's study. Candles stand in clusters along the workbench and shelves, their flames steady in the still air. From them, golden light pools gently over the bench, slipping into the hollows of tools, spilling across open pages, and warming the edges of glass. Vessels, the light is rich and mellow, softer than sunlight, warmer than moonlight, a glow that seems to slow time itself. The scent is subtle but distinct, the clean, honeyed trace of beeswax. In these times, it is no ordinary light. Beeswax is precious, far more costly than the tallow candles burned in most homes. Where tallow smokes and sputters, beeswax burns cleanly, its flame bright and enduring, favored in chapels and by those who could afford its luxury. Here it is not wasted. Every candle is a deliberate choice, its slow burn a quiet investment in the long, careful work that unfolds in this room. On the far wall, a tall cabinet stands open, revealing row upon row of books, stacked like treasures in a vault. Their leather bindings are cracked and faded, each one bearing the marks of countless hands and the weight of years. Some are pale and worn almost smooth. Others are darkened with oil from fingertips, the spines softened into gentle curves. Several of the volumes are fitted with brass clasps, their tiny locks still fastened, not to keep them safe from theft, but to shield their contents from casual eyes. The metal is tarnished to a soft green in places, yet the shapes of the locks are delicate, the work of skilled hands. When you tilt your head, you catch faint glimmers of gold leaf in the lettering pressed into certain spines, though many titles have long since faded to ghostly traces. These books are not merely possessions. They are guardians of knowledge, holding centuries of thought between their covers, waiting only for the right hands to open them. You ease one of the volumes from the shelf, the leather creaking softly in your hands. It opens with the faintest sigh, as though it has been waiting for someone to turn its pages once more. Within, the parchment glows warmly in the candlelight, its surface smooth yet faintly uneven beneath your fingertips. Large, painted letters mark the beginning of a passage, their curves and lines filled with pigments so vivid they seem untouched by time. Within the strokes, thin veins of gold leaf shimmer, catching the flicker of the flames and scattering it in tiny flashes, like sunlight on water. The margins bloom with delicate vines and blossoms, fantastical beasts, and curling shapes that weave between the text. Every stroke speaks of the patient hand of a medieval scribe, a craftsperson, who not only copied words, but breathed life into them with color and light. It is less a book than a piece of living art, a meeting place between knowledge and beauty, designed to be read slowly, reverently, as if in prayer. You trace the spines of several more books, and notice the variety of scripts pressed into the leather. Some bear Latin titles, the scholarly tongue of much of Europe, steady and familiar to those in cloisters and courts. Others are written in the flowing elegance of Greek, their letters curling and looping like waves upon the page. And here and there, you find volumes adorned with the intricate, jewel-like script of Arabic, its lines sweeping gracefully across the covers. These are not mere trophies from far-off lands. They are threads in a great tapestry of knowledge. In these pages, the wisdom of the ancients has traveled vast distances, Greek philosophies preserved and expanded by Arabic scholars, then carried into the Latin West through translation, through trade routes, pilgrimages, and the movement of scholars. Ideas crossed deserts and seas, passing from one mind to another like a torch kept alight against the dark. In the alchemists' study, they stand side by side, their languages different, but their purpose shared: to seek truth in the hidden patterns of the world. On a low shelf near the workbench rests a shallow wooden bowl, its surface darkened with use. Inside, small ingots and rough pieces of metal lie together in quiet contrast: dull gray lead, the reddish warmth of copper, the muted silver sheen of tin. Among them glimmer a few scattered gold shavings, so fine they catch the light like dust suspended in air. They seem ordinary at first, mere substances from the earth. Yet, in the alchemist's eyes, they are not fixed in their nature, but waypoints on a journey. Lead may dream of becoming gold, just as a person might dream of becoming something more refined, more whole. Each metal, with its weight and color, is a stage in the great work of transformation, not merely of matter, but of the spirit itself. Here, the boundaries between the physical and the philosophical blur. Change is not simply possible, it is inevitable, the quiet law beneath all things. Near the hearth, a squat ceramic jar sits with its lid slightly askew. As you draw closer, the air sharpens a temps that pricks the senses and leaves a faint taste at the back of the throat. It is sulfur, its scent as unmistakable as it is enduring. To the alchemist, it is a valued ingredient, essential in certain experiments where fire and transformation are at play. Its presence speaks of heat, reaction, and the restless movement of elements shifting from one form to another. But to the uninitiated, the smell alone is unsettling, a reminder of brimstone, of stories whispered about dangerous work, and the shadowy forces it might awaken. Here it is neither omen nor warning, it is simply another voice in the chorus of scents and substances, a tool in the hands of one who knows its nature. The candles sway gently in the stillness as you rest your hand on the workbench, letting the warmth of the room settle deeper into you. Your gaze drifts to a parchment half covered in looping script, and the words pull you into a story, one older than the walls around you. It is the tale of the philosopher's stone, told slowly, like a bedtime myth passed from master to apprentice over generations. The stone is said to hold the power to transform base metals into gold, granting wealth beyond measure. Yet the truest alchemists whispered that its greater gift lay not in riches, but in the elixir of life, a draught of perfect purity, capable of granting health, even immortality. But these promises were never meant for greed alone. The stone, they said, could only be found by one who had undergone their own transformation, refining not just the metals on the bench, but the spirit within. To seek it was to walk a path between earth and heaven, between the laboratory and the soul. Here in the quiet of the study, the legend feels less like a tale from distant lands, and more like a truth waiting patiently to be uncovered. In a narrow cubby beside the shelves, several scrolls rest in a wooden rack, their ends capped in worn leather. You lift one carefully, the vellum cool and smooth beneath your fingers, and carry it to the bench. When you unroll it, the candlelight spills across a map of the night sky, stars marked as tiny gilded points, their constellations traced in fine, deliberate lines. The drawings are more than decoration. To the alchemist, The heavens are not distant and indifferent, but a living clock whose turning hands shape the world below. Certain alignments, they believe, can favor a distillation, strengthen a tincture, or make metals more willing to yield their secrets. The moon's phase, the sun's position, even the subtle march of the planets, all are threads woven into the fabric of the work. Here, the boundaries blur between astronomy and astrology, observation and belief. The alchemist's eyes move easily between the shelves of earthly matter and these rolled maps of the sky, for in both they see the same patterns at play, cycles of transformation written in the language of the cosmos. At the far edge of the workbench, the smooth grain of the oak is broken by a scattering of shallow scratches. They are not the careless marks of years of use, but deliberate carvings, small, neat symbols, etched with a steady hand. Here, a circle, with a small cross beneath it, the mark for copper, tied to the planet Venus. Beside it, a curling shape like a snake's head, the sign for Mercury, fluid and changeable. A triangle pointed upward for fire, a downward triangle crossed by a line for earth. Each is simple enough in form, yet layered with meaning. In these marks lies a shorthand for complex recipes, a private language shared among those who know the craft. They are both practical notes and quiet charms, reminders that the work of the hands is always guided by the symbols of the mind. You run your fingers lightly over the carvings. The edges are smooth from years of touch, as though generations of alchemists have traced them while deep in thought, grounding themselves in the language of their art. Near the hearth, on a small side table, sits a mortar carved from pale stone, its surface worn satin smooth with long use. Beside it rests the pestle, heavy in the hand yet perfectly balanced, its rounded end darkened from years of pressing against leaves and roots. You lift it, feeling its familiar weight, and begin to grind. The dried herbs inside crackle softly at first, then yield to a muted, rhythmic crunch as they crumble into finer and finer fragments. With each turn of the pestle, the air grows richer, with their scent a mingling of earth-green leaves, and something faintly floral. There is no rush in the motion. The circle of stone, the steady pressure, the sound of plant becoming powder. It is work that invites the mind to stillness. In this repetition, the world beyond the study seems to fall away, leaving only the small, deliberate movements of your hands and the quiet music of the task. When at last you pause, the herbs lie transformed at the bottom of the bowl, ready to give their essence to whatever mixture the alchemist has planned. On a narrow shelf above the workbench, dozens of glass vials stand in neat rows, their slender necks sealed with tight cork stoppers. Even in the dim candlelight, their contents gleam with quiet allure. A deep, almost velvety red in one, a shimmering green in another, like sunlight filtering through forest leaves. Some hold colors that seem to shift as you move, the light catching flecks of gold or silver suspended within. Others are opaque, their surfaces faintly clouded, hinting at something volatile or precious inside. The glass itself is hand-blown, each vial bearing subtle ripples and tiny bubbles that tell of the craftsman's breath. These imperfections bend the light, making the liquids within appear alive, as if they might swirl or change entirely if left long enough in the dark. Each vial is a small mystery, perhaps a tincture, an extract of rare minerals, or the distilled heart of some long-forgotten recipe. The alchemist knows them all by sight, but to any other visitor, they are simply silent keepers of secrets. Above your head, bundles of herbs hang in the warm, dry air, suspended from the rafters by twine. Chamomile, with its small pale flowers, offers a faintly sweet scent, gentle and calming. Sage hangs beside it, its soft gray-green leaves carrying a sharper, cleansing aroma, while further along droops a cluster of lavender. Its deep purple blossoms, still rich with fragrance. Their placement here is deliberate, away from damp, bathed in the slow heat of the hearth, ensuring their potency is preserved through the winter months. To the alchemist, these plants are more than ingredients. They are allies. Chamomile might be steeped into a soothing draught for troubled sleep, or coaxed into releasing its essence for an experiment in purification. Sage may be burned to cleanse the air of illness, or ground into a mixture for strengthening the body. Lavender's oil can calm the restless heart, but also mingle with rarer substances to influence the nature of a tincture or perfume. Their shadows sway gently in the flicker of candlelight, the faint rustle of their drying stems whispering of the fields they once grew in. In the corner of the study stands a small cabinet of dark wood, its surface polished to a soft sheen by many years of touch. Its edges are carved with quiet ornament, curling vines and tiny flowers, but your eye is drawn instead to the keyhole, small and precise, set into a plate of tarnished brass. The lock is no mere formality. Whatever rests within is meant to be kept from casual hands. Perhaps it holds substances too volatile to be left on open shelves, powders that spark at the slightest touch of moisture, oils that burn with unnatural heat, or shards of minerals that whisper danger in their beauty. Or perhaps it hides recipes not meant for every apprentice to see, formulas too tempting for those who seek only gain without the discipline of the work. The wood around the keyhole bears faint scratches, as though past attempts had been made to open it without leave. But the cabinet remains shut, its secrets intact. A silent reminder that not all knowledge in this room is meant to be freely held. Hanging just above the cabinet's keyhole is a small charm, no larger than a coin, its surface worn smooth from years of handling. It swings gently when brushed by the faintest draft, catching a glimmer of candlelight along its edges. The design is simple, a circle enclosing a star, etched so finely that the grooves have softened with time. To anyone else, it might seem a mere trinket, but to the alchemist it is a ward, a symbol of protection. Some say such charms keep ill fortune from entering the workshop. Others believe they guard against accidents in dangerous experiments. The wear on its surface tells its own story. Countless times it has been touched, perhaps in quiet moments of concentration before lighting the hearth, or when turning the key to the locked cabinet below. In a place where earth, fire, and unseen forces mingle, even the most learned of minds finds comfort in the presence of a small, trusted talisman. On the far side of the workbench lies a leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age and curling slightly at the corners. When you open it, the first thing you notice is not the main text, but the narrow lines of tiny handwriting squeezed into the spaces between. These marginal notes are a world of their own. Quick strokes of ink that speak of thoughts arriving mid-task, sudden insights, or quiet doubts. Some are measurements adjusted from the original recipe. Others are fragments of symbols or cryptic words that could be part of a code. and some are more like whispers than records. Too hot, try, under the waning moon, or not for sharing. It is impossible to know if these scribbles are meant as secret instructions for a trusted apprentice, or as private musings the alchemist never intended another to see. Yet here they are, crowding the edges of the page like ivy creeping over old stone, the unguarded traces of a mind forever reaching beyond what is written. On the center of the workbench, a pair of small brass scales rests upon a block of polished wood. The metal is dulled in places from years of touch, but the arms still pivot with smooth precision. Beside them lie neat rows of tiny weights, each no bigger than a fingernail, arranged in order, like a miniature regiment. You watch as a pinch of pale powder is lifted with a slender spoon and tipped carefully into one pan. The other pan holds the weights, their mass-adjusted grain by grain, until the beam rests perfectly level. There is a quiet reverence to the act. The alchemist knows that too much, or too little, could ruin a mixture, turning medicine to poison, or rendering hours of work useless. In this space, accuracy is not merely habit but ritual, a discipline that shapes both the experiment and the experimenter. The faint clink of metal, the soft whisper of shifting powder, the stillness as the scale finds its balance. It is a music of precision, heard only by those who work close enough to listen. On a low shelf near the hearth sits a shallow glass dish, half filled with something that catches the candlelight in a way no simple liquid should. It is silver, yet more alive than silver, a gleaming fluid metal that rolls and swirls at the slightest tilt, breaking into bright beads that merge again, as if with a will of their own. You know it by name, mercury. Its beauty is hypnotic, almost seductive, the way it moves without a ripple, reflecting the room in warped, liquid fragments. But behind that fascination lies danger. The alchemist works with it cautiously, knowing its fumes and touch can harm. That the same element sought for its alchemical promise can, over time, claim the mind that studies it. For now, it rests undisturbed, a mirror to the dim study, and the watcher who lingers before it. A reminder that in this place, wonder and peril are often poured from the same vessel. On a narrow table by the window, a small collection of bottles stands in orderly rows. Their glass is thick and slightly tinted, some green, some amber, to protect their contents from the sun. Each bears a handwritten label, the ink faded but still legible, for coughs, for fevers, for melancholy. These are not the mysterious elixirs whispered about in taverns, nor the dangerous substances kept under lock and key. They are the gentler side of the alchemist's craft, remedies prepared with care for neighbors, travelers and weary townsfolk who come seeking relief, infusions of thyme and honey to soothe a raw throat, bitter bark steeped to draw down a fever's heat, delicate blends of herbs and flowers to ease the mind when shadows grow heavy. In a time when physicians are scarce and cures uncertain, the alchemist is not only a seeker of gold or cosmic truths, but a quiet guardian of health. These bottles, lined like sentinels in the lamplight, speak of compassion as much as curiosity. From somewhere beyond the thick oak door comes a soft, deliberate knock. Not hurried, not timid, a measured sound, as if the visitor knows this is a place where silence and concentration are valued. The alchemist pauses, quill poised above a half-finished page, and listens. The knock comes again, and through the small window in the door you glimpse a figure, cloaked against the chill of night. The hood hides most of the face, but you catch the glint of watchful eyes, and the way the figure leans forward slightly, as though burdened by more than the weight of the garment. When the latch lifts, the night air spills in, cool and smelling, faintly of damp earth. The visitor steps inside with a quiet word of greeting, their cloak carrying droplets from the earlier rain. They do not come to trade or to gossip. Their stance, their silence, all suggest a matter of urgency, something they trust only the alchemist to hear. And so the door closes once more, sealing the outside world away, as the first low words of their request fall into the warm, shadowed air. Around the study, dozens of candles burn at varying heights, their flames bending and straightening in the faint currents of air. They flicker like silent dancers, casting shadows that sway across walls, shelves, and the curve of glass vessels. The light is never still. It moves with a rhythm all its own, a slow breathing of brightness and shade. This constant dance is strangely calming, the way it softens the sharp edges of the room and turns familiar shapes into gentle silhouettes. Here, time feels slower. The shifting patterns soothe the mind, just as they must have soothed countless nights of patient work at this bench. Light and dark presence, and absence always in motion, yet never hurried. In this wavering glow, every corner seems alive with quiet possibility, as though the room itself is listening. The alchemist speaks softly, almost as though telling a bedtime story, their voice blending with the low crackle of the hearth. First, a small bundle of dried leaves is measured and laid upon the scale, the balance checked with careful eyes. Next, a mortar receives the leaves, and the pestle begins its slow, steady grind, a rhythm as old as the craft itself. A pinch of pale powder is added, followed by drops of a golden liquid that glistened briefly before vanishing into the mixture. All the while, the air grows warmer, the flames at the hearth steady and strong, their heat keeping the ingredients pliable, the hands unshaken by cold. There is no rush here. Each step follows the one before like links in a chain, each movement deliberate, each pause purposeful. It is not only the experiment that takes shape, but the quiet patience of the one conducting it. The unspoken understanding that good work cannot be hurried. In this warmth, time feels suspended, the outside world forgotten, the present moment all that matters. From the hearth comes the occasional soft pop as a knot in the wood yields to the heat, sending tiny sparks upward for a heartbeat before they fade. The sound is comforting, like the sigh of an old friend, each pop marking the slow consumption of the logs. Across the room, a water clock ticks in its own gentle rhythm, not the sharp precision of gears, but the patient drip of droplets falling into a lower vessel. Each one lands with a muted plip, measuring time in a way that feels less like a command and more like a reminder. Together, the fire and the clock create a quiet duet, warmth and motion on one side, cool precision on the other. They are the two halves of the alchemist's world, the unpredictable nature of flame, and the steady certainty of water. In their company, the study feels both alive and timeless, a place where hours pass unnoticed, measured only by the dwindling of wood and the filling of a bowl. On a low shelf near the workbench, a set of shallow, polished metal bowls rests in careful alignment. Their surfaces catch the fire's glow, bending it into warm, wavering shapes that shift with each flicker of the hearth. They are not merely vessels for mixing in the alchemist's mind, they are mirrors of a kind. In alchemy, a mirror is a symbol of reflection, not only of the outer world, but of the inner self. Just as a true transformation of metals requires the right conditions, so too does the transformation of the soul. To gaze into these bowls is to see fire, shadow, and one's own face, all layered together. It is a reminder that the work done here is not only with herbs and metals, but with thought and spirit. The alchemist believes that every experiment is in some way a mirror revealing not just the nature of the substance at hand, but the nature of the one who seeks to change it. At the far side of the room, the alchemist sits at a heavy oak desk, its surface crowded with tools, scraps of parchment, and the stub of a candle leaning in its holder. The only sound, for a moment, is the faint crackle of fire in the hearth, until a page turns beneath his hand. The parchment makes a dry, whispering sound, like wind through autumn leaves. Some pages are brittle at the corners, others softened by years of use. The ink faded, but still resolute in its curves and strokes. His fingers linger at the edges, not in hesitation, but in quiet respect. Each turn is deliberate, as though the knowledge might slip away if handled too quickly. The candlelight catches the gold in the ink on certain headings, and the black lines of text ripple slightly in the uneven glow. Outside, the world may be dark and cold, but here in the turning of these pages is a warmth of another kind, born of patience, curiosity, and the silent companionship of the written word. In the cradle of his palm, the alchemist holds a small ingot, no larger than a child's toy block, yet heavy enough to command attention. Its surface is smooth in places, rough in others, bearing the marks of casting and cooling. Under the candlelight, it glows faintly, the deep, warm gleam of worked metal. This is not merely a lump of matter. It is a fragment of humanity's long story. A story in which metals have lured explorers across oceans, sparked wars, toppled kingdoms, and driven centuries of toil. Gold, silver, copper, each has held a different place in the web of desire, necessity, and belief. For the alchemist, the ingot is both a prize and a challenge. It represents the physical reward sought by rulers and merchants, but also the promise of transmutation, that base matter might, through knowledge and patience, become something greater. In his hand, it is at once a weight of the present and a whisper from the past, a reminder that what gleams in the light often casts the longest shadows in history. The alchemist leans back slightly, letting the ingot rest on the desk, and gazes toward the hearth. In his mind, the metal is only part of the picture. The true work lies in understanding the four great elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Earth, the solid and dependable, giving form and weight to all things. Air, invisible yet ever moving, the breath of life and the carrier of change. Fire, both destroyer and creator, able to temper or consume. Water, patient and persistent, shaping stone over centuries and cradling life in its depths. Each element alone is incomplete. Each needs the others to bring balance. Too much fire scorches, too much water drowns. Earth without air is stagnant. Air without earth is rootless. The alchemist's work, then, is not merely to mix and measure, but to listen to sense when one element overpowers the rest, and to restore harmony. It is a lesson that applies as much to the human spirit as it does to the crucible. Beyond the four familiar elements lies a mystery the alchemist rarely speaks of aloud, the quinta essentia, the fifth essence. It is not something one can weigh on a scale or trap in a vial, yet it is said to be the purest, most incorruptible substance in existence, in hushed tones. It is described as the invisible thread binding the universe together, the hidden harmony from which all life springs. Some call it the soul of the world, others, the breath of the divine. To isolate it, the old texts claim, is to hold the key to perfect health, limitless knowledge, perhaps even immortality. The alchemist runs a finger along the spine of a cracked leather tome, its pages swollen with age. Within are cryptic diagrams, looping symbols, and half-finished equations, all pointing toward this elusive truth. It is the goal that lies behind the work of centuries, the silent companion to every measured grain of powder and every careful turn of the stirrer. And though no one has yet captured it, the mere possibility glows in the mind like a coal in the dark, never fully dying. On the workbench, a square of deep blue cloth lies smooth and waiting. One by one, the alchemist places each instrument upon it. Calipers folded shut, the compass tips meeting like clasped fingers, the astrolabe gleaming faintly in the dim light. Glass rods, polished smooth from years of handling, are aligned beside small brass spoons, each resting in its appointed place. The movements are slow, unhurried, almost ceremonial. It is not merely tidying away, but honoring the tools that have served the day's work. A scratch in the wood of the mortar's rim recalls an experiment gone wrong. The worn handle of a brush carries the memory of gold leaf applied to a page long ago. When the last piece is set down, the cloth is folded over gently, shielding the instruments from dust and from the curious eyes of tomorrow's visitors. The bench is left bare except for the steady candle, its light warming the grain of the oak. The day's work is done, but the room still hums with quiet presence, as though the air remembers each measured weight and whispered incantation. At the corner of the desk, the inkwell waits, a small round vessel of dark glass, its rim stained from years of use. Before retiring, the alchemist takes a scrap of oiled parchment and fits it snugly over the opening sealing in the moisture, so the ink will not thicken or fade overnight. It is a small gesture, yet it speaks of the care that flows through every part of his work. A dried inkwell means interrupted thoughts, lost words, and the frustration of knowledge halted midstream. Outside, the church bell tolls once, low and resonant, marking the close of another day. The candlelight trembles as if aware of its own dwindling wick. In this simple act, covering the ink, capping the quill, aligning the stack of papers, lies the quiet acknowledgement that the night has claimed the hours, and tomorrow will bring its own mysteries to tend. The alchemist moves with the patience of someone who knows that haste has no place in this room. Loose sheets of parchment, each bearing notes in his cramped, careful hand, are folded once, then again, the creases pressed smooth with the side of his thumb. They make a faint rustle, a sound like distant leaves stirred by an evening breeze nearby. Books are gathered from the bench and the window ledge, their spines cracked but still strong. One by one, they are stacked in descending size, leather covers brushing softly against one another. Each is placed with intention, the most delicate volumes cushioned in the middle, the heaviest grounding the pile at its base. the stack is not hurried into place. Instead, the alchemist lets his fingers rest briefly on the top book, as if feeling the heartbeat of the knowledge within. This slow, deliberate act marks the true end of the day's labors, a quiet sealing away of thoughts until the morning's light invites them back into the world. In the hearth, the flames shrink back, their bright tongues curling into themselves until only deep, glowing embers remain. They pulse faintly, a heartbeat of heat in the quiet room. Now and then, one collapses inward with a soft sigh of ash, sending up a single thread of smoke that twists toward the chimney. The warmth lingers, spilling lazily into the air, softer now, no longer reaching across the room, but cradling only the space nearby. Shadows grow bolder, filling the corners, stretching along the shelves where vials and jars now rest in silence. It is a peaceful surrender, the fire yielding to the night, the study settling into stillness. Outside, the world is cool and silver, under the moon. But here, the last breath of heat is a reminder of the day's life, banked like a secret until morning. The candle's flame flickers, throwing long, slender shadows across the desk. Shadows that stretch, waver, and finally slip away as the light dwindles. For a heartbeat, the room is caught between glow and darkness, the shapes of tools and books softening into a dreamlike blur. A last curl of warm beeswax drifts into the air, sweet and faintly earthy, mingling with the lingering scents of wood smoke and herbs. It is a fragrance the alchemist knows well, the quiet perfume of endings, of work set aside and night welcomed in the dim hush that follows. The wax hardens, the wick glows once, and the room exhales into stillness. The iron key fits snugly into the ornate keyhole, its edges polished smooth by years of use. A gentle turn, and the lock yields with a muted click, a sound that feels final yet comforting. The door closes with the weight of oak and history, sealing the study's treasures within the quiet tools, the resting books, the cooled hearth. Behind that door, the scents of wax, wood, and herbs will linger in the darkness, waiting. Outside, the night is cool and silver under the watchful moon. The cobblestones still damp from the earlier rain. The alchemist slips the key into his pocket. It's reassuring. Wait, a promise. Tomorrow, the door will open again, and the work, both ancient and eternal, will continue. Stepping out into the street, the cool night air greets you like a gentle hand against your face, carrying with it the clean scent of rain-washed stone. Somewhere beyond the tangle of narrow lanes, the river murmurs a low, steady sound, as if the water itself is whispering secrets to the dark. The cobblestones glisten faintly under the silver moonlight, each puddle holding a wavering reflection of the stars. The settlement lies hushed, its houses leaning close over the path as though sharing in the quiet. You walk on, the echo of the keys, soft click, still in your ears, knowing the study rests behind you, sealed, warm in memory, and waiting for another dawn.